I'm here to moderate this panel today. So I think it's pretty obvious what we'll be talking about, but we're going to be talking about the opportunities that robotics is allowing different types of supply chain operators to improve their business, to make their operations more efficient. We're also going to be talking about the challenges of that. Consumer habits are changing. Robotics technology is changing seemingly by the minute here, so we're going to dive all into that. We're going to talk about key trends, best practices for how you can make your robotics deployments successful early on if it's your first time doing something like that. We have a great panel lined up to help us do this. We have a great mixture of a robotics end user, a robotics integrator, and of course a robotics developer to help us dive into all of these different topics. So I'm going to let David, maybe we'll go down the line here, start with a quick introduction of yourselves, and we are going to be having questions at the end of this for the last 10 minutes or so. So if you guys have questions for the experts here, make sure you're prepared. So David.
Morning, everyone. I'm David Meadow. I'm the Chief Information Officer for Lane Automotive. We are a wholesale distributor of aftermarket performance automotive parts and accessories.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Zac Boehm. I'm the Chief Automation Officer at Hy-Tek Intralogistics. I've been partnered with Exotec really since day one in North America, and I focus on partnerships as well as leading a group that works with our sales team on highly dynamic projects, including SkyPod systems.
Hey, good morning, everyone. So I'm Stanislas Normand. I'm the Managing Director for Exotec in North America. At Exotec, we have developed a solution of warehouse automation based on fleets of 3D robots. And our main focus is order fulfillment for e-com, distribution, grocery, and many other industries.
So we joked in our planning for this that David's going to be the star of the show. He's the end user here, which hopefully a lot of you folks in the audience are end users as well. But we wanted to give David a chance to explain a little bit more about the robotics journey that Lane Automotive has been on and what they're undertaking, what they've done so far, and why they're doing that, just to sort of give you guys a lay of the land as for what his background is when it comes to robotics.
Sure. For us, our journey really started about a week after the pandemic shut down most facilities. We looked at our access to labor. We looked at how our performance was in our own industry, how we were serving our customers, and we really needed to transform our distribution operations in order to really push a 2 to 3x volume growth out of our facilities. So for us, it was extremely important that not only did we look at every opportunity out there for goods to person and what solutions were available, but also not treat it as an island of automation, right? And by that I mean just a goods to person system, everything else still operates as it does today. It was extremely critical that we made sure that whatever we put in for a goods to person system was complemented as an entire ecosystem of automation. How did we and how do we go about really maximizing a goods to person system, and that's where our journey began. For us, we probably invested about 2.5 times into the supporting automation around our Exotec implementation that we did the actual Exotec system itself, right? Just so we get that full, clear, end-to-end solution.
And to be clear, you guys use different types of hard automation for quite some time. This is really your first foray into a robotic system.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Zac, I want to direct this question at you. You've done a lot of different jobs, obviously, at Hy-Tek. You've seen a lot of different challenges. What sort of warehouse operations have you guys seen so far that can be effectively solved with robotics or augmented by using robotic systems?
That's a great question. We have been working with customers that are in apparel fulfillment, omni-channel, e-com, retail, wholesale fulfillment. But one of the things that we've also seen is a great opportunity in the beverage space, utilizing the SkyPod system as an example. That is a space that needs automation, right? They're having the same exact challenges as other spaces are with getting labor, keeping labor. We're actually sharing a story a little bit before it came up about how challenging it is to, once you get people in the door, how do you keep them in the door? And you really need to enable them. And I think David brought up a really, really good point. In any of these markets that you look at this type of technology, it's not an island of automation to itself, and that's really where we've been successful, being able to design solutions around the SkyPod system and being able to feed it and take away from it, or using it as a batch processor, or really utilizing it to take non-value added movement out of most facilities. So we've really seen a great opportunity to take that and enable the people that you can keep in the building and to be able to automate those processes.
I don't know if you can share the story that Zac was just referring to about the labor challenges that you guys had during the pandemic, which most everybody had those challenges, but that really steered you guys at Lane Automotive into, we need to figure this out.
Yeah, I mean, certainly we're not alone, and we weren't alone during the pandemic. I think, our regional attrition rates were somewhere in the neighborhood of 65 to 75%. So we would hire 30 on a Friday, and within 2 weeks, we may have 3 left. And we may be lucky to retain one for at least 90 days. And part of that was driven by the increase in wages that were consistently happening. We had fast food restaurants that were starting hourly wages were $21 and up just to get workers in the door. So it became very, very cumbersome to try to hire during a pandemic and run hiring events. So.
Stan, how about you? I want to make sure you come in here, but what types of operations, tasks, are you guys seeing generally customers needing help solving?
Zac mentioned a few. Definitely the one that we've seen growing a lot recently is omni-fulfillment. And that's really an interesting, problem to solve with robotics due to the flexibility of the solution. So really when we're talking about warehouse automation, it's automation versus manual operations. But then if we talk more specifically about robotics, then we'll talk about robotics versus traditional automation. And the key advantage of robotics here is the flexibility and also the sort of density of the automation. So if you look at traditional automation, which can be conveyor intensive or can be heavy in terms of architecture of steel structures in the warehouse, with robotics, all the automation is in one little package, right? And you work with a fleet, and then they work in the warehouse. And that gives a lot of flexibility to customers in terms of use cases. So in particular for omni-fulfillment, you can do with one robotic system each picking, but also case picking. You can do e-com, wholesale, all with one system. And also it allows for growth, because if you want to add throughput, you just add robots, right? And you don't need to necessarily plan for the next 20 years when you invest in a robotic solution. You can plan for the next 2 to 3 years, and then you can add robots to increase your capacity, to increase your throughput, and also to add, more use cases, more distribution channels. So that's really what we're seeing in terms of customers is more demand for omni-fulfillment solutions.
You mentioned flexibility, which I think is super important. There's many things, David, that in the world that are changing, whether it's economically, consumer behaviors are changing all the time, which affects how you guys go about certain things, and hopefully maybe a lot of you folks are dealing with those same challenges as well. But what strategic considerations did Lane Automotive take into account? Again, this was your first foray into looking at, analyzing, adopting, implementing, deploying robotic systems. What are some keys that some folks in the audience should also take into account if they're doing the same thing?
Yeah, I mean, if you can, don't do this in a brownfield environment. It was not that fun. I think strategically, it's how disruptive can you be? When do you plan this type of implementation? How are you planning that implementation, right? Can you phase it to make sure that you still hit your own customer SLAs, you're still driving good customer experience? It's also, do you understand your order profile and your order characteristics? How are those driving the tasks? What does it look like current state? What will it look like future state? And really take the time to understand how that can evolve in the context of the goods-to-person solution that you're vetting.
Can we unpack that comment about the brownfield? Why not to do that? So you're referring to an existing facility, correct?
Correct.
Take us inside. Why?
I said that in jest. It's really, for our facility, which was erected in 2017. You know, there was no notion of goods to person at that point. We have a 100,000 square foot, 2-story super pick module, and the rest of it was hand stack and pallet rack and pushback. We had to find a spot inside of our distribution center in order to put our Exotec SkyPod system. So it's a lot of moving parts and pieces. We tore down, I think, 55% of our pallet racking and then re-erected it in a different orientation in order to accommodate the Exotec SkyPod system. So again, it's when are we doing this? How are we executing? You know, can we do this in a way that's non-disruptive to either operations or to our customers?
Zac, how about you? I mean, this is right up your alley.
No, I think one of the things that David said that I want to highlight is the scalability and flexibility and understanding your order profile. So let's hit the first one, is scalability and flexibility. So we have multiple SkyPod systems that we have live and are going and deploying right now, and not one of them is the final design size, right? So when we look at order profiles or year-over-year growth, those types of things, we try to scale the system. Robots is the easiest, but we actually have multiple projects now that where we're actually moving systems. So we're moving and expanding systems. So we are really heavily relying on that scalability and flexibility to be able to change the different order profiles, to do omni-channel. Maybe we have an e-com building that now we're doing omni-channel out of it. We're taking a system and we're actually doing one where we're actually going to take one and break it in half and put it in 2 different facilities because the volume movement changed from one building to another, one region to another. So that's a really good point. The last thing that I would say with the order profiles, will yours ever change? Every single one I'm used to constantly changes.
Our order profile 7 years ago is materially different than our order profile today.
So, and I think that's a story for everyone, right? And you've got to align with a technology and a provider that can help you adjust your solution in order to do that. Because even if you put it in today, 5 years down the line, it's going to look completely different. And you need a scalable and flexible solution in order to help do that. And you need the systems feeding it and going around it. Going back to your original point, if you don't take that into consideration, you're going to be in a lot of challenges. It's going to affect your overall flow. It could affect your culture too as well, right? So you really have to plan that out, align with a good partner, align with a good technology like Exotec and the SkyPod system in order for that to work for you.
And I think that's where, talking about robotics, it's also one characteristic of those solutions usually is the modularity of the components. So because once again, all the automation is in the robots, usually the racks are passive. You can add rack and storage capacity. You can add additional stations. And I would say overall, and it's been the case with most of our projects and with yours for sure, is that even during the design phase of the project, customers can have additional requirements because their order profiles change or because they rethink some of their solution, and that's where robotics can really help with that because we can change the design up till a few weeks before the installation, add stations, add more robots, remove robots sometimes. So that's one key aspect is modularity, and Zac mentioned customer reselling a system and splitting it into 2 systems to sell to a different customer. And that's really what this type of technology allows, is to separate each individual component of the system due to its modularity and potentially rebuild different systems with it.
Zac, are you seeing that type of flexibility or modularity in general when it comes to robotics? I feel like one of the things that I hear from robotics developers is that they are trying to make it easier for these systems to be deployed or redeployed or maybe moved throughout a facility. Are you seeing some of that as well?
Yeah, everybody preaches the capability to be able to expand systems and that type of thing, and that's easy. But if you could take and move and relocate a system, that's really something you may have to consider for your network or your business in the future. It's something that you really have to do some studying on, because at times when I first got in, if I'm fixing rack to the floor, it's not going to be easy to move. But actually, as we dug into it and worked with Stan and his team and Exotec overall, we were actually able to kind of develop a plan where we're able to do that. And it is something that you need to definitely understand, especially with the new robotics that are coming to the market or have only been in the market the last 5 to 6 years. A lot of these have not been out there for an extremely long time, like you would see with a shuttle or a mini load that have been out there for 10, 15, 20 years. So those are all pieces, but really the thing that's going to come up is have they actually done it? Can they point to something that they've done? And Exotec did. They've done that to Europe, and now we will have multiple use cases here in North America.
Was that something that you guys were aware of? Is, we can move this around potentially if we need to, as your buying process and habits flow, that you can, it's not a little bit of an undertaking, but it's not the end of the world if you have to move something.
Yeah, I mean, for our facility and our implementation in general, unless we're going to lift it out of our facility and put it into a new DC, it's staying where it is. We could always add another system next to it, but we've put so much automation in and around it to really drive the inbound, and that's another critical strategic piece. I mean, if you're thinking about goods to person, you really need to put just as much, if not more, emphasis on the inbound operations and feeding that system as you do the outbound for fulfillment. Because if you can't feed it, it's not going to be of any use to you. So with that, I mean, all of our conveyance, all the additional put to light and automation in and around that system, it makes it very difficult just to lift it up. But one thing that we did do is really think forward 5 to 7 years. Did we leave enough space for additional robots? Did we leave enough space for additional, picking stations? Did we leave enough space for additional replenishment stations to feed the system? That's really the planning that went in ahead of time.
How do you do that? Can you explain a little bit about what goes into that planning process?
A lot of analytics, right? What markets are we serving? Where is our strategic direction as an organization? How could our order characteristics and profiles change? How are our buying and purchasing habits going to change? How's that going to drive the number of transactions on the inbound side of the system compared to the outbound? And then on the outbound side, how will a change in our order profiles determine whether or not the automation we put in around Exotec, whether or not it's still going to be viable in 5 to 7 years, right? So we spent probably 7 months really understanding our customers, our customer behavior, not only historical, but also align that to our strategic goals and strategic expansion goals.
Zach, so what are some things that you guys typically, when you're working with a customer, they've made the decision, hey, we're using this system, we understand the value that it's going, how do we ensure, what are some things that we can do to ensure that this deployment goes as smoothly as it possibly can go? What are some typical best practices that you suggest when working with folks?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things that we pride ourselves on is we don't want to just resell the technology. We want to fully deploy, fully bring the system through and into what we call operational readiness. And that's one of the biggest things that we've focused a lot on, especially around technology and deploying technology. What we've seen is there's a little bit of a void. So once you go through training, and then as David was talking about turnover, those types of things, how do you keep the knowledge base around the system? What SKUs do you put in? How does it affect other areas? How do you do the replenishment? When do you do the replenishment? Those types of things, and that's all built around operational readiness. And we've done a lot of focus on that with some of our clients because we need them to utilize the system the way it was planned, right? The way it was originally solutioned, the way it was originally sold. But at times that could be 6, 9, 12 months after the fact, right? So we need to be able to take that knowledge and be able to build that operation up in order to enable the technology and utilize the technology and make sure everything that we said it would do at the beginning, it is doing, right? And it's enabled by software and other things like that. And we want to make sure that's all put together, and it's all encompassing package, and then continuous improvement, that's a part of it too as well. So Stan mentioned one of the greatest parts about being able to add more robots to the system. How do you know that? Well, when your order profile changes, you got to look at the data. You have to understand, now maybe my lines per hour is going to change. Maybe I have to push replenishment to a different shift. These are all things that you need to take into consideration as you continue to use the technology as you move forward.
Are the warehouse management systems, is that a challenge? Is that trying to make everything work?
No, those aren't challenges at all.
Work in harmony together?
No, it's one of the things that that we have and we can bring to the table with the SkyPod system is we have our own software that allows us to really kind of enable the technology together. And we'll talk about this in some of the future questions, but in the future we see not just putting fixed automation around these technologies, but more flexible automation, multiple different types of automation, and being able to enable that together. You could do that with your WMS. It would work well if you have the timeline and if you have the resources and at times the funds in order to do something like that. But if you have that capability to be able to plug all those technologies in, and then not only just plug them into the like a middleware or an execution layer, but be able to optimize, and that's a big piece. As you go through, MODEX, you're going to see people that are going to talk about software layers. They can bring pieces together, but can they bring pieces together and then be able to optimize those to fluently work together and to be able to get the most out of those systems? That's one of the big pieces that I would add to that when you're asking about the WMS.
Stan, I want to bring you in. I mean, how does trying to ensure that the customer experience, that the customer installation is smooth as possible, how does that guide Exotec's approach to maybe certain technology development or sales approaches?
Yeah, so it's very easy for us to work with customers who are going for their first automation projects because they're open to a lot of suggestions to improve their operations, and they know there are huge benefits for them. The tougher customers, I would say, are people who have been using automation for decades and who are used to doing it in a certain way with traditional automation. And one of the challenges is to be able to work with them with their data and to change the way they automate the warehouse, because some of them are used to having systems for batch picking, and then they will put a huge sorter behind that, and it's being able to work with them to show them that instead of building their warehouses with multiple systems, they can use bigger robotic system to do all that, especially in the case of omni-channel, where the system can do the picking, but can do the sorting, and they can keep the same performance. And they can even work on sequencing, the cases coming out of the system for wholesale, and that can, even have an impact on how they will load their trucks, and down the road how they can be more efficient with their deliveries, and all that, is possible with good robotic system. And especially because they're software driven, these are systems that in the future, will be able to be improved through software. So that's one thing that can be a challenge with customers that are used to working with automation, is getting them to change the way they look at their warehouse, and not just building it with bricks, but looking at the full operation and understanding how robotics can solve many issues at once.
Is there, one thing, again, if you're speaking to folks here who might be installing their first robotic system, something that you guys did that you would harp on, to make sure that they're ready for, as far as trying to ensure a smooth deployment?
Yeah, I mean, as with any enterprise transformational project, right? And especially when we talk about integration and software, where are your internal core competencies? For us, we are in the enviable position, at least at Lane Automotive, to have source code to our WMS, source code to our ERP. So our internal team stuck to that. We already had an integration layer with our WES provider, which runs all of our conveyance and automation today. So rather than us try to directly integrate our WMS with Exotec, we chose to just leverage the existing integration with our WES and let them drive that integration, right? That way we're not reinventing the wheel, we're not taking on tasks and parts of that project that really we shouldn't be taking on, right? Let somebody else do that who has the competency in it. Outside of that, I think it's really, what are my test plans? Outside of a general project plan or software development lifecycle project, it's how have your internal operations teams been brought along to really understand what the outcome is going to be when you deploy and when you go live, and are they engaged, right? Integration of software is just one piece. It's, does that actually integrate well with your process? Did you take the time to understand and design end state processes that are going to actually help your operations teams and really deliver the outcome that you desired when you purchased a goods to person system?
Stan, I want to get your thoughts on omni-channel fulfillment. How have you seen robotics influencing omni-channel?
Well, it comes back, to the flexibility of those solutions, and it's really the capacity to, bring to customers solutions that are able to handle multiple cases with the same technology. So, I mentioned earlier being able to do each picking and case picking with the same system, but that's also the capacity to be able to adapt to consumer habit changes. And we have in mind one example of a customer in apparel with whom we deployed a system last year, and the system went live, and it turns out that during the period just of the deployment of the system, so over a few months, their business had changed, and the proportion of their wholesales grew significantly. They're working with Amazon. And they had designed a system around really being optimized for each picking, but we were able, with the same storage capacity, the same robots, just to add a specific station with a different picking process dedicated to wholesale, and they're able to do both at the same time during the same shifts with the same robots. So it came at just the extra cost of one additional station, but no redesign of the system. And it's really where that flexibility comes in.
Zac, how about you? What are you guys seeing as far from omni-channel perspective?
So I actually talked about this yesterday, and one of the speaking things that I had yesterday is it's kind of I guess you'd call it the rise of retail, right? It's coming back. And that is driving more people to look at omni-channel fulfillment. And it's challenging. It's not easy. So Stan was talking about some of the different things that are constantly changing. We talked about order profiles as well. David mentioned data and data analytics. That is really, really key to when you look at an omni-channel building. One of our partners that we work with, not only do they do wholesale, retail, and e-com in the same building, but they also create artificial peaks for themselves by launches. And they have a monthly launch, the beginning of the month, every month. So those SKUs are going to be Super A's, and then later in that month they're going to become B's, C's, or whatever in the SKU affinity. And that's challenging. But I think one of the great things that I've seen with their system, and it's been deployed and has ran well over 8 million cycles on their solution, is at the pick station, the operator doesn't have to think, is this an e-com order, is this a retail order, or a wholesale order? They're just driven to simply pick product and put product in a specific destination. And the more you could keep that simplistic, and that I don't have to do specific operations for retail or omni-channel or e-com, it allows them to focus on really just driving the efficiency of the picking process. So we are seeing a lot of that. Data is a huge part of it, but also keeping the process simple is the most important thing, because if you can keep it simple across all the different channels, it shouldn't affect you as much. Now you're going to probably need more horsepower for e-com, because that's when your line movement is going to, basically your line movement's going to increase and your units per line is going to decrease, right, versus your retail and your wholesale. And then you've got to watch the different peaks and when do they match. So we end up really modeling probably 5 to 10 to 15 days of the year that could potentially be the worst case, right, that we have to look at, instead of just focusing on Black Friday, e-com peak, or just the overall average peak. So there's a lot of work that has to be done in that, and David mentioned it already, is you really have to zoom in on that, and you really have to understand that. You really have to understand how it's going to affect the automation.
And I think just to add to that, like, it's also that with that technology, there are minimal disruption to operations, because it's not conveyor-based. We have no elevators in the system and such. Adding throughput is just adding robots, is turning them on, inducting them in the system. We don't need to stop the system, to add more hardware, more installation time. So that's really one also key advantage of the technology.
So we're going to open it up to Q&A in about 5 minutes, I believe. But before we do that, I want to cover everybody's favorite topic. That's ROI, return on investment. What can you? Not looking to get into specific numbers, but how does Lane Automotive look at things from an ROI perspective for its robotics investments?
Yeah, I mean, without getting too far in the weeds for our project, you really have to look at, again, those order profiles. What are you driving through that system? What are your staffing requirements in and around that system? And what is your expectation for goals and metrics and KPIs that you're expecting your associates to drive? right? What is that life cycle of break even? And I didn't look at this project as an ROI cycle. I looked at it as when can we break even? Because if we're doing our job correctly, we will always continue to reinvest, right? And that's why I kind of take a stance of crawl, walk, run. This was our walk, right? We're layering in things like AI in and around it to really maximize labor and driving what orders and picks go to the system at what times of day based on staffing levels and so on. So for me, it was, can we have at least a reasonable break-even point, and that we were able to identify, and we're on track to achieve it.
What have you? You see anything different than that? I'm sure.
Oh, David's right on point. My topic with our customers is always, what is the cost to do nothing, right? If you do nothing, it's going to cost you something, right? Now, it may be putting in a pick module. It may be doing other things like that, or focusing on the slower picking process. But when we do an ROI analysis, we do obviously a lot of labor analysis, cost avoidance analysis, accuracy. But one of the things we talked about earlier was, how much does it cost you to go get the 30 people and train them and bring them in the door, interview them, evaluate them. You do everything that you need to do for employees coming in the door, and then how much is that lost, right? And what does that cost you every single year? And that's a nice little thing that we like to add into the ROI piece based upon the percentage of overturn or turnover, and then how much does it actually cost to get that person that you're likely going to lose in the door. And that actually adds quite a little bit to the ROI versus just enabling the employees that you get to keep to the building.
You talked about this at the beginning, right, with the turnover rate, right, and it was not something that was unique to you guys, but the way that I look at robotics is it's almost guaranteed labor, right? So I don't know if that influences the ROI calculation at all, but there's so much more that goes into it than just the cost of the system, right?
Well, I think, just in the existing layout that we had, and again, 100,000 square foot footprint of a 2-story super pick module, we had associates in any one given day clocking 10 to 12 miles of walk time doing their picking, which is just crazy. And it also really constrains your ability to move product out the door. You take those folks that may have been picking at a lines per hour rate of 50 to 60, and you put them in front of a good goods to person system. For us, we expect the average lines per hour for that one individual now to be 290 to 300 lines per hour based on the order profile. So that really changes the dynamic, right? And really how you staff. It's also, from an employee perspective, we wanted to give our employees something that was more ergonomic. Don't kill yourself all day long. Carrying large totes and large product 2-totes that are on a pick and pass system on a conveyor. And how do we do that, and do that in a way where our employees and our associates come along with us and they have buy-in so that they can actually drive the results you're looking for.
Did you have anything to add, Stan?
Sure. And I think no customer disregards the ROI, but some have bigger issues, which is just being able to continue to grow with the challenges of recruitment and employee retention. So there's the performance of the systems that will allow them to grow, but it's also about improving the work environment for the operators. And that is, I would say, more and more considered by our customers. We work a lot with them on the ergonomics at the stations, for instance. All these factors come into consideration.
So we have just about 10 minutes left, and we want to give you folks a chance to take advantage of these three gentlemen up here and ask them any sort of questions that you might have about adopting robotics, implementing robotics, using them, redeploying them, best practices, any questions out there. We'll pass the mic around so we can hear you. Don't be shy. We hit all the major points, I guess. Good job, guys. Stan, we'll start with you. As the robotics guy up here, where do you see robotics going the next 5-10 years? Obviously, specifically for logistics, but new enabling technologies? Are we opening up new applications? Are we getting easier to deploy? Give us your futuristic view 5 to 10 years out. What's this show going to be looking like?
Yeah, so if you've walked the floor of this show in the past 2 days, there's one clear tendency is that robots are everywhere. Even if you look at the booth of some of the more traditional players, everybody is pushing for some level of robotics, whether it's for fleet robots, picking arms. You have robotic arms for unloading trucks. We see a lot of those, including Boston Dynamics that is getting into that. I think that's interesting that they chose this specific use case. So it's more than a trend. I think it's really part of the industry now, and it will keep growing. Where it will be in 5 years from now, I think it's we'll see more and more innovation. That's the strength of robotics as well, is that it's software based, so it's very agile, and for companies that are innovation driven, it's very easy to improve the solutions constantly and come out with new products, new innovations. I know it's the case for us, so we allocate 10 to 15% of our revenue to R&D because it's really in our DNA to innovate, and we plan on coming out with new products for the market every other year over the next 5 to 10 years. So.
Anything you want to spill now about what's coming down?
Well, we came out with a few new products last year, so our new conveyor line, which is software driven, and our new WCS, but more things to come soon.
How about you? I mean, Zac, you guys talk and see all sorts of robots. I'm sure you get early looks at what's coming down the pike, but just your thoughts on what's happening, where it's all going.
So Stan hit a couple of them. I think you're going to see the continued rise of piece picking, right? Especially tied to pick stations at goods-to-person technology, or transitioning from a goods-to-person to maybe a sortation solution. I think we're definitely going to see the advancements of the software that drives that, right? So it makes it capable of being able to pick more products, be able to understand what product may be halfway overlapped by another product in a mixed SKU bin, as an example. So I think you're going to see definitely some advancements there. Where I see us going in minimum next 5 years is taking all these great technologies that are out here and finding the best use case in a building for all of them, and having the capability to have an ecosystem where you might have multiple robot OEMs all working together in unison to drive an overall solution. And it's been being done with what I'd call fixed automation, or I came up with a term yesterday with monument sortation, right, where you put a sorter in your building, it's kind of a monument, it's fixed. There's a lot more fixed automation that's going to be coming, flexible automation that's going to be coming to be able to be the inbound to a SkyPod system, the outbound to a SkyPod system, packaging, all those different types of things. That's really going to allow that to be, essentially, we want to become touchless, right? We want people sitting in a computer, watching the operations and handling anything that may be, out of the norm, but the normal operation from day to day, we want that to be, basically automated, optimized. So that's where I really see us going in the future in this entire industry.
How about you? Obviously, great success with Exotec so far in your first jump into robotics, but as the user, we're in keeping pace with everything that is constantly changing, like we explained before. What do you hope to see? Is it ease of use? Is it interoperability, which maybe I'll come back to Zac with you about, but where do you hope things go the next 5 to 10 years to make things at Lane Automotive continue to go in the right direction?
Yeah, I think Zac and Stan hit the nail on the head with a few points. In general, I think the technology is really starting to mature, but really hasn't hit that peak maturity cycle. So, I think everybody in and around the show that's offering robotics goods-to-person solutions, they're starting at point A, and a lot of these are more smaller picks and smaller pieces versus larger picks, larger pieces, which really only satisfies today a portion of a typical distribution center. So it's really, how do you scale that? How do you allow for larger pieces to be picked out of the goods-to-person systems? And really, I think where people are driving is more towards lights off, pick, pack, ship operations, right? How do we achieve that? Because today, you're still going to have to man it in some way, shape, or form. And I think the technology, the software, the innovation will help drive some of that lights off automation in the future.
I think you were starting to hit on interoperability maybe in your last answer.
Yeah, so we do a lot of AMR robotics. That's really where it's going to start because there's a lot of great OEMs out there. But really where I would focus is exactly what David talked about, is the software that brings everything together. And it doesn't only bring it together, but optimizes it and optimizes the flow during different times of the day, or allows you to move operations from one process to another, robotics from one process to another. Right, and being able to do that, and I think that's one of the things that I'm going to see first. Interoperability's got some of its own challenges, right? And I know there's a lot of people that are working on that, and some really, really smart people working on that. And I look forward to seeing the progress that they will come to in the next few years. But I think just being able to head to the lights out type facility, as David talked about, where you have people stationary at a computer just watching the operations run day to day, and you're really only handling exceptions that you might see.
We only have a couple of minutes left here, so I think maybe we'll wrap up with just sort of a closing thought from each of you. David, maybe we'll start with you. Keys to success for other folks here who are looking to invest in or continue to invest in robotics and automation.
Yeah, I think I hit a lot of those. I think the one piece that I'd be remiss if I didn't pass on to everyone is change management. Change management first. Right? What does your operation look like today? How are you structured? Are you doing this in a vacuum at an executive or a management level and we're just pushing it on the employees? Or are you really creating an environment where those employees, those associates can buy into what you're transforming? And that can be done by committee, it can be done by knowledge sharing, it can be done iteratively throughout the project, but I think that's really important because otherwise you're going to end up with a situation where you put in all this automation and now go use it, right? And it sometimes it works, sometimes it does not. But we were really, really focused on making sure that our operations teams really understood why we were doing it, how it would affect them, positively. And what the outcome would really allow them to do in the future at Lane Automotive.
Everything David said is 100% right. I would just say, add to that, find the right partner, right? There's quite a few partners that are here at the show that are in this industry, and they're not all created equal. So make sure you ask the right questions, make sure you do site visits, make sure you understand what their experience is level from, all the way from the beginning, from sales and solution, all the way through deployment, all the way to operational readiness, as David just called out, because you want that partner to be through it the entire way. If you're relying on them to give you the technology, they should be able to help you optimize the technology through your operational readiness.
Stan, we'll give the final words to you, sir. Just final thoughts on navigating the future of warehouse logistics with robotics.
Yeah, well, I think it's an exciting time for warehouse robotics. There are lots of different technologies out there. I think if you're thinking about automation in your warehouse, you have many options, and you can really find the ones that will allow you to consider your full end-to-end warehouse, and not just thinking about some sort of, I don't want to say like gimmick robotic to solve one little issue. But also it gives you the flexibility, if you're not sure about your investment timeline, you can go for technologies that will grow with you and that will allow you to scale your investments and support your growth potential. And come see us at our booth.
Yeah, stop by the Exotec booth, stop by the Hy-Tek booth if you're looking to learn a little bit more about how they can help you throughout your journeys with logistics robotics. So David, Zac, Stan, thank you guys very much.
Thank you all.